Good evening. Welcome to the forum here at John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. I'm Professor Ashton Carter, and I and our Dean, David Ellwood, welcome you here to the forum, especially you new students. We're very privileged this evening to have as our visitor Ban Ki-moon, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the Republic of Korea, that is South Korea. The most important thing you students need to know about Ban Ki-moon is that he is a graduate of this institution. He's everything we want you to be and you can be, and we're very proud that one of ours has risen so high, and we have the same aspirations for each and every one of you. Ban Ki-moon is someone well known to Americans like myself and my colleagues here who have dealt with the Republic of Korea, a lifelong diplomat, joined the Foreign Service in 1970 and has risen steadily in that service. He has served 3 presidents of South Korea, each with distinction, Kim Young-sam, Kim Dae-jung, and now Roh Moo-hyun. Both in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and in the Blue House. During all that time, he's been a steady hand in U.S.-South Korean relations and in dealing with the subject that I'm sure will be the centerpiece of Ban Ki-moon's talk tonight, namely dealing with North Korea. I first met him in 1994. I was in the Pentagon at the time and was working on the plans, which thank God were never realized, for striking from the air the North Korean nuclear facilities at Yongbyon, and for the war that we all feared would ensue had that attack been launched. Fortunately, that proved unnecessary. In 1998, I had the privilege, I suppose you'd say, of going with Secretary of Defense Bill Perry to Pyongyang, North Korea, the first presidential envoys to go there, and my coach among South Korean diplomats was none other than Ban Ki-moon. So I've known him for a long time, have great confidence in his judgment, but I must say, look upon the affairs he stewards today with great alarm. Why alarm? First of all and foremost, because for the last 4 or 5 years, North Korea's nuclear weapons program has been proceeding unchecked, to the point where North Korea is believed to have made somewhere between 6 and 8 nuclear weapons. Now think about that a moment. Graham Allison, one of our other speakers tonight, has written at great length about this. Just look at what happened in New Orleans with Katrina, the obliteration of a city. That's what each nuclear weapon built by anybody, anywhere in the world today can portend. And in the last few years, North Korea has been making those bombs and continues to do so at the rate of about 1 per year. Now, Minister Ban Ki-moon gave months ago as his title for this evening's address, Beyond the Six-Party Talks. The Six-Party Talks, those talks intended to cap North Korea's nuclear weapons program, and you probably all know that in the last 48 hours there's been a result of those talks. A result, finally, after years. A result that some are optimistic about, some are pessimistic about, but nobody's in a better position to illuminate what's good and what's bad about that agreement than Ban Ki-moon. I hope also, since he's looking beyond the North Korean nuclear situation, he talks also to us about what's to become. What's the destiny of this funny little place, North Korea, whose GDP is far less than what we will spend to reconstruct New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, but which yet poses the threat of 1 nuclear weapon per year as we sit here this evening. And beyond that, to the role of Korea in East Asia and in East Asian security. Once again, no one better suited in this time, and especially in this place, to address these matters than you, Ban Ki-moon. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you very much, Professor Carter, for your very kind introduction. And Dean Ellison, Dean Joseph Nye, and most importantly, Dean Elwood, distinguished faculty, student, and guests. Thank you very much for your very kind participation this evening and for the chance to speak to you on the latest development on the Korean Peninsula. I will let you in on a little secret before I begin my presentation. You probably may not know that when I first arrived here 23 years ago as a student, aspiring a diplomat to learn more about international foreign policy, then my nickname was strangely enough, JFK. It wasn't because anyone envisioned any great politician and American president like JFK for me. But the truth was that I was just from Korea. So just from Korea stands for I'm now just from Korea too, after 23 years ago, after 23 years after. And I'm very much delighted to see you in JFK, where I really had a good chance to learn much more from distinguished scholars who are sitting in this podium, and they have been my great professors and teachers. I met some of my teachers today who really struggled with me, who was not trying to understand what he was talking about. But now, just standing on this podium, I used to sit always where you are sitting, but this is really sometimes scary and intimidating for me because there are so many people even sitting upstairs. This is a usual scene which I used to see, but when I'm standing myself here, I'm really, threatened. I'm very much concerned how I will do tonight. I arrived this afternoon and driving in along the Charles River with my wife, I was very much struck by the beauty of early autumn in Cambridge. But when I entered through this Allison Gate, I thought, I was lost somewhere because everything was unfamiliar. I was asking to my staff, is it true that I'm a graduate of JFK? Because I couldn't understand, everything was unfamiliar to me. I tried again, to enter from JFK street side. Now I realized that that was the same and old, building. Now you have all, different facilities here. But I think this forum once called the Arco Forum is now to Kennedy Forum. It's a great personal honor for me to speak with you today. Among my many memories is the emotion and excitement I felt as an aspiring diplomat when I was a student at this school. At that time, as a student over age 40, I was 40 years old at that time, I thought that all the professors might have thought that the subject he was teaching was the most important subject. He was giving a lot of homework, and all the professors were not caring about foreign students who just barely arrived from, and my English was not that fluent at that time. So, but looking back, I think I can say with a certainty that my Harvard experience has served me well throughout my career. The excellence of the ideas and insights offered by many distinguished prominent scholars who have graced this campus have really enriched us all. Professor Elwood, Professor Nye, Professor Vogel, Professor Allison, Professor Carter, they are among those distinguished figures as their ongoing accomplishment continue to earn them worldwide respect. As I look at them, I'm reminded of an excellent vintage of red wine. With their wisdom and insight, they have matured and inspired time, acquiring greater character and depth which cannot be achieved overnight. So to these distinguished professors, I thank you very much, dearly. Thank you very much. To the students, I remember that, like you, with the passion that comes from academic curiosity. I was busy traveling here and there, attending forums and seminars and also lectures. I sincerely hope that in time that you will too have the chance to put the knowledge and experience you will gain in this distinguished esteemed university to use in public service. Based on my own career as a diplomat, I would like to share with you this evening some thoughts on the security situation in Korea and in Northeast Asia, including the key role of the US-Korea alliance under the subject of Beyond the Six-Party Talks. In fact, when I chose this subject, I was not quite sure by the time I stand in this podium whether we would be able to agree and adopt the joint statement as we did yesterday. But somehow I was a little bit more optimistic than anybody else, and among several subjects, I chose this subject, Beyond the Six-Party Talks. I think this is a quite timely subject at this time, since you are going to be the first person. This is my first public appearance and public speech as a Korean foreign minister to speak about the future of Korean Peninsula when this North Korean nuclear issue is resolved. Even though we don't claim that North Korean nuclear issue has been over, we have, I think, achieved a very important historic milestone in the final resolution of this North Korean nuclear issue. So I think you should be privileged about these opportunities. Now, the resumed session of the fourth round of talks started last Tuesday, but during the 37 days of recess, there was a great deal of diplomatic efforts made by each party to narrow down the differences among the parties, particularly between North Korea and 5 other participating countries. I myself visited Beijing first, then came to Washington, D.C. to have a consultation with Secretary Rice, and other senior officials of my government also traveled to Russia and Japan to have a consultation among the 5 parties. Key issues which have been outstanding comprise the scope of nuclear programs for dismantlement and the right to peaceful use of nuclear energy by North Korea. During the past week, all parties concentrated their discussions on the key issues and finally managed to agree on a joint statement. This is the first but very important step toward the full resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue. During my stay in New York last week and until today, I was in frequent contact with my counterparts of the countries, of 4 countries participating in the 6-party talks. The negotiation in Beijing was at such a critical juncture, so I had to make a lot of contacts on meetings with the Secretary Rice and the Foreign Minister Li Jiaoxing of China, and Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia, and also Foreign Minister Matsumoto of Japan. I think I made at least 7 or 8 telephone conversations with Secretary Rice just during 2 days at the final stage of this negotiation. It was very hectic, and also I had to meet twice or 3 times with each of these foreign ministers in New York. In fact, the General Assembly of the United Nations provided us very good opportunities and forum venue. There were all the foreign ministers there, and we had a very easy access each other over telephone or meeting in the lobbies of the United Nations. Otherwise, I think it might have been very much difficult for among foreign ministers of 4 parties to have such a frequent and very focused negotiations on that matter. When we discussed this matter, we instructed our chief negotiators, respectively in Beijing, so that they would act swiftly upon the instructions from respective foreign ministers. Now, I would like to explain some major elements of joint statement and its significance. First, the 6 parties reaffirmed the goal of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and North Korea committed to abandoning all nuclear weapons they have claimed to have manufactured and all existing nuclear programs, and returning to the NPT at an early date, and also committed to abide by the all full scope safeguards of the IAEA. By agreeing on the goal and principles, we will be able to build a firm foundation to resolve the North Korean nuclear issue, which has been the main threat to the security on the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia. Secondly, as the statement includes respecting North Korea's right to peaceful use of nuclear energy, promising to take steps to normalize relations among the parties concerned and promote economic cooperation, and also North Korea's major political, economic, and security concerns will be addressed. In implementing this joint statement, we can expect North Korea to open up more and become a more responsible member of the international community. Thirdly, the directly related countries will negotiate a permanent peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. As you know, since the division of the Korean Peninsula, and particularly after the Korean War, this armistice agreement has been in force, and we will start to negotiate to transfer this current armistice arrangement into a lasting and durable peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. This will have, once completed, have a tremendous impact, not only in the Korean Peninsula, but also in Northeast Asia and beyond. Fourth, North Korea and the United States and Japan will take steps to normalize relations. I'm confident that these steps will contribute to peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and the region. And fifth, with the resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue, inter-Korean economic cooperation will be accelerated, and thereby the peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula in Northeast Asia will be consolidated. Sixth, as the objective of a joint statement to stop the development of nuclear weapons will be very much conducive to the strengthening of the global non-proliferation regimes to prevent the proliferation of the weapons of mass destruction. Seventh, the 6 parties agreed to explore ways and means to promote a security cooperation in Northeast Asia and beyond the Korean Peninsula. Thus, when we are over with North Korean nuclear issues, we think that these 6-party talks forum could be developed into more permanent security mechanisms in Northeast Asia. As you know, again, there is no such security mechanisms established in Northeast Asia in the region. In Asia, we have only one such security mechanism called ASEAN Regional Forum, comprising of 10 ASEAN countries and some other countries, including United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Korea, Japan, and China, and Russia too. So we need to have, it would be very much desirable if we have such security mechanisms in Northeast Asia after resolution is made on nuclear issue. Throughout the process of six-party negotiations, Korean government has been playing an active role to move the negotiation forward based on the principle of a peaceful resolution through dialogue and diplomacy. In particular, the Korean government made an important proposal on July 12th to provide 2 million kilowatt of electric power to North Korea to get Pyongyang back to the talks and help make a substantive progress in the negotiations. In addition, I would like to emphasize without hesitation the importance of Korea-US coordinations in producing this historic joint statement. Throughout the whole process, I greatly enjoyed the close work with Secretary Rice and was satisfied with the outcome we were able to produce. Taking this opportunity, I want to express my appreciation to the flexibility and creativity shown by all the participating countries, particularly the United States government. Although we should expect to encounter some bumps along the road during the implementation process, I believe that all six parties will be able to overcome any difficulties we might face based on the spirit of cooperation and the flexibility. We hope that North Korea will be forthcoming in faithfully implementing its commitment as early as possible so that the respect and benefits included in the joint statement can be soon ascertained. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to go back to the other issues that I intended to address in the beginning. Let me start with how Korea has advanced politically and economically to this day. Looking back over the past quarter century, we can see that remarkable changes have taken place in and around the Korean Peninsula. Just 25 years ago, politically, my country was ruled by authoritarian leadership. Economically, we were still lagging behind with per capita GNP with only $2,000. The news on the peninsula was mainly of confrontation and clashes with no hope of reconciliation between the South and North. Korea's contribution to the international community was limited due to its preoccupation with its own survival and development. Yet in just over 2 decades, Korea has undergone a fundamental change. Korea stands as a mature democracy, the world's 11th largest economy, and an active player on the world stage. Korea has broadened its diplomatic horizons, engaging proactive diplomacy to promote the vision of democracy and market economy. Korea's progress is largely derived from a combination of political leadership's outward-looking policies and the dedicated response of the people. Our quest for a better future is continuing still through practical innovation and reform aimed at greater efficiency and transparency. Ladies and gentlemen, the neighborhood Korea lives in has also been a factor. Northeast Asia is home to about 1/4 of the world's population and comprises approximately 1/4 of the global GDP. Consequently, Many futurists predict Northeast Asia will emerge as a new driving force for the global economy. But as we can observe, both converging and diverging forces are at work in the region. On the plus side, the tide of globalization is accelerating economic cooperation and socio-cultural exchange. Conversely, this region is also suffering from the diverging forces of mistrust and friction emanating from past history and differences in social political systems among the major powers. These destabilizing factors undermine not only regional harmony and stability, but also global peace and stability. A new order in Northeast Asia will depend on the visions and policies of the region's political leaders. The principal players should work to overcome divisiveness and resentment while striving to make this region safer and more prosperous. To this end, I believe it is important to institutionalize a regional security regime in the future to secure peace and stability and restore trust among the different parties. The six-party talks really is an unprecedented multilateral forum in Northeast Asian region. As a forum for institutionalized communication and confidence building among the participants, I believe the six-party talks will serve as a good example for the development of multilateral dialogue mechanism to address regional security concerns in the future. Now I'd like to briefly touch upon our relationship with North Korea. We are pursuing currently a policy for peace and prosperity. This approach aims to lay the foundation for peaceful unification by promoting peace on the peninsula and pursuing the mutual prosperity. We believe that inter-Korean reconciliation with Pyongyang is the right path. We were able to achieve significant progress in many areas, including economic cooperation and exchange of people. We hope to solidify the cooperation and expand it to other areas on the basis of mutual benefit. Now, again, let me briefly touch about the US-Korean alliance. In fact, as I am going to conclude, I cannot finish without mentioning about this very important Korea-US relationship. As history has unfolded and relationships have shifted over the past half century, the rock-solid Korea-US alliance has remained a constant. This alliance has played an invaluable role as a firm foundation for Korea's great achievements. Without such deep and profound ties, the political and economic dynamics of Korea today could not have been achieved. Korea and the United States fully share the common values of democracy, the market economy, the human rights, and the rule of law. Korea has always stood beside the United States in addressing issues of mutual concern, such as the North Korean nuclear issues, as well as the regional and global agenda for the 21st century. As I mentioned in the beginning, the close consultations over many meetings and telephone conversations between Secretary Rice and myself reaffirmed the closeness of our alliance. As the relationship has evolved into a more equal partnership, the US and Korea have resolved almost all long-standing alliance issues during the last couple of years, such as relocation of Yongsan base and also relocation of all US military bases into two big hubs in South Korea, and relocation of US Embassy and defense burden sharing. Except this defense cost sharing, all three issues have been pending during last at least 20 years. These issues have caused some sources of conflict and disappointment in our relationship over last at least over 2 decades. We have decided with firm determination that without resolving these long-standing issues, we would not be able to enjoy this very strong Korea-US alliance. Korea's decision to dispatch its troops to Iraq, about 3,300 soldiers, which is third largest troop contributing countries, demonstrate Korea's firm commitment to this alliance with the United States. We also pledged $30 million to help Americans affected by Hurricane Katrina. This all demonstrates that the Korean people have never forgotten the help generously given to Korean people by Americans when we were in need. For regional peace and stability, Korea and the United States will work together as a major driving force to achieve this common goal. Through this joint effort, I hope that we will see a more peaceful and prosperous Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia in the future. To that effect, it is very important that the people of the two countries make every effort to better understand and become closer to each other. I do hope that the guests here in this hall will join all in this rewarding endeavor. Through this joint endeavor, I believe that peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula, as well as in Northeast Asia, is well within our reach. Now I'd like to conclude my remarks, ladies and gentlemen, while sharing some recollection I had when I saw the Harvard students here tonight. I hope I have delivered my presentation well, because I have been very much anxious standing before you. That feeling was same when I first obtained my admission from Harvard University, particularly Kennedy School. I suddenly was struck by some question, fundamental question. Why had this world-renowned, world-class academic institution given me admission, accepted me as a student? I was just academic novice from a small country like Korea. The more I thought about it, the more worrisome I was, the more worried I became. I thought somehow this admission department might have overlooked or made some mistakes. Would I be able to keep up with all this, at my age, to keep up with all young students, with all intimidating professors, but I could have survived. Maybe in case of you, many of you, you may have some same feelings. If any one of you have some similar thoughts as I had 23 years ago, then I would say with conviction, I would like to give you some sense of assurance that after 23 years, in the course of 23 years after my graduation, I have realized that Harvard never makes any mistakes. If you work hard, I think, I'm sure that you will be used as a great asset for your personal dreams or for your country or whatever career you may have in the future. Your dedicated hard work can make, I think, a difference, and you will always become one of the excellent leaders in your community, and not only in this Harvard community, but when you go back to your own country. So I hope you will enjoy working and enjoy studying, but But you should not enjoy only. You should also study hard. And if you study hard, it will be not good not only for you, but also for your country, but indeed, eventually, for the global community as a whole. And I thank you very much for this unique opportunity to address you. Thank you very much. All the best.
Well, we do make mistakes, but we didn't in this case. And I can think that you can see from the address you just heard from Minister Ban Ki-moon that certainly in his case, we did not make a mistake. Now, we also don't make mistakes in picking professors. And we're going to begin the discussion tonight with two of our most distinguished scholars of international affairs. Now, Joe and Graham and I have each been director of the Belfer Center here. It wasn't always called the Belfer Center, but anyway, the Center for Science and International Affairs. This is a place in the school, for those of you who are new, which has for many years now, since it was first founded by Professor Paul Doty, dedicated itself to research and action on this problem of nuclear danger. That's the centerpiece of Minister Ban's speech tonight. I'm going to ask both Graham first and then Joe to add some remarks to those that have been made by Minister Ban. And before they do, I just want to reflect myself on what Ban Ki-moon said. I too hope that this recent agreement reached in the last 48 hours leads North Korea to do all the things that on paper it says North Korea is going to do. But I've dealt with the North Koreans, and I observe that pinning them down is always the hard part. I worked once for Paul Nitze when he was negotiator with the Soviet Union in arms control, and I was not much older than our youngest students here. And he's the person who coined the phrase, "the devil's in the details," for arms control. And if you look at this agreement reached in the last 48 hours, it says North Korea will do all these things. It doesn't give a timetable. It doesn't say how we'll verify that they're going to do it. It doesn't address one of their key demands, which is to have something called light water reactors in compensation. So there are a lot of details for the devil to reside in. And I, for one, am not prepared to begin the celebration, although I believe it is a step forward. I'll close what I wanted to say with one other thought, which is that I have been working over the last few years on the question of what do we do if this fails? Because I'm of the view that we can't tolerate a continuing nuclear weapons program in North Korea. It's not only that they might use them, and I'll remind you, and again, we all have Katrina so vividly in our mind, that was the disappearance of a city, but not the people with the city. One nuclear weapon, one, is the disappearance of a city with all the people in the city as well. And North Korea is in the process of making the capacity to do that at a steady rate. It doesn't have to be them who uses them. We don't know who they may sell them to, into whose hands they may fall in the future if, for example, North Korea collapses. I'm a physicist, and I'll tell you that the half-life of plutonium-239, which is the material out of which these bombs are made, 24,000 years. So North Korea is today creating a capability that will cast a shadow over every city on this planet for 24,000 years, many turns of the wheel of history. And therefore, I believe that if the diplomatic path doesn't succeed, we're going to need to take another path. Maybe that's something Graham and Joe will comment on as well. So let me ask first Professor Graham Allison and then Professor Joe Nye to comment on this subject. Then we'll take questions from all of you on the floor.
Thank you very much, Ashton. It's a great pleasure to be here, especially an honor with the foreign minister, whom I knew when he was a student here some time ago. And I think that as you listen to his comments tonight, And not only in his professional capacity, but in his personal capacity, you can see why he's been so extraordinarily effective over a whole career in diplomacy in dealing with often recalcitrant parties, not only in his own government and not only in North Korea, but even an American ally. And I think that while I agree with Ash very much that what's been appropriately noted and even celebrated to some extent in terms of this agreement is the beginning of the road, not the end of the road, we wouldn't be here today except for the very hard and effective work he's done. So I'm very proud to be on the panel with him in that respect. I'd make 3 quick points. I think first to underline the point that Ash made. Why did Ash say when we started this, and I think Ban Ki-moon as well, why do we view this situation with such alarm, the situation in North Korea? And I think the fact is that in the last 2.5 years, just take the recent past, North Korea has taken 8,000 fuel rods that previously were frozen, reprocessed them to produce enough plutonium for 6 additional bombs, and turned on their nuclear weapons production line. Let that process run, and you have every reason to worry about precisely what Ash said, namely the sale of one of these weapons to somebody like Osama bin Laden, who could bring that to an American city, or 2 or 3 such weapons. Secondly, one's got to worry very much about a cascade, what the UN High-Level Commission report said, a cascade of proliferation, which would follow North Korea becoming a recognized nuclear weapon state, which would probably start with Japan. Ban Ki-moon wouldn't say so, but I would say South Korea wouldn't be too far behind, in my betting, and Taiwan would be looking. So you're talking about an entirely different world in Northeast Asia. That's point 1. Point 2, as we try to think, and now we're early into the game of analyzing what happened just in the last 48 hours, but if I ask myself, of the 6 parties with whom you've been trying to deal with over this period, during the period of the 6-party talks, which of the parties moved furthest from its policy and behavior of the previous 4 years, just as a controversial way to think of it in terms of a game. And in my list, I think the first place is tied, and it goes on my list to China and the United States, not to North Korea. Okay? China, I think because after years in which China thought that it had fulfilled its responsibilities by serving as host of the meetings and providing concierge services, like providing tea or something, that it had done its part. And it was up to the other parties to decide what they were going to do. But in the last months, and then rather intensely here in the last couple of weeks, China became an active diplomatic player, actually tabling a draft joint agreement and several revisions of the draft, and then, most surprisingly to me, giving the US and North Korea, in effect, an ultimatum that said this draft is going to be finished, accepted or rejected within the next 24 hours, and it's over to you. So if you read the Sanger story today, you see a lot about the internal politics of the American government in that respect, where, according to Sanger, on Sunday afternoon, President Bush had to decide either to accept this agreement, as it was stated, or, as the Chinese had explained to him, to have them explain that the agreement failed because the US failed to accept it. That's not exactly the active role for China that President Bush had counseled China to play, but it's an active role for China, and it's very interesting for me. And I think what it bodes for the future, I'd be very interested perhaps in the questions if the foreign minister would say something more about. In the case of the US, I regard this as a great triumph for the new second-term Bush foreign policy, in which you see a realism and pragmatism that's at quite sharp contrast with the more ideological approach of the first term. In the first term, the kind of summary of it for me was Vice President Cheney's one-liner, which said, "We do not negotiate with evil, we defeat evil," and left it at that. So after occasional insults the U.S. basically provided for North Korea no carrots, because the policy said no benefits for North Korea, no rewarding of bad behavior, and no sticks. So as North Korea proceeded to reprocess these 8,000 fuel rods for 6 more bombs, the U.S. basically neglected the situation. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. So the fact that the U.S. has moved into a zone of negotiating about carrots and sticks, basically what's called the more for more approach that Ash Carter and Bill Perry proposed back in 1998, seems to me to be a movement into the reality zone and a big shift for the Bush administration, which I think is quite positive. My final point is, are we prepared to celebrate that the problem of a nuclear North Korea is over? Absolutely not. I agree very much with Ash. I think we're at the beginning of a road here, but the road looked like a dead alley, or dead end for me, for a long period of time. And I see a little bit of glimmer of hope in this situation. It seems to me, basically, we're on the 10-yard line, if you put it in football terms, but our 10-yard line. So it's 90 yards to the goal line, even of an agreement. And then there's battles and battles to go between that and implementation. But I would say that nonetheless, we're finally on offense, and there's an idea about where the goal line is. So I'm rather positive, and I'm very admiring of the work that Ban Ki-moon did in getting a rather recalcitrant group to this point.
Joe?
Let me echo my colleague's pleasure at having Ban Ki-moon back at the school. He's been a voice of reason on the Korean Peninsula and in Asia generally for more than a decade as National Security Advisor and now as Foreign Minister. So I think the Kennedy School is justly proud of him. I also applaud what he's accomplished, and I think, as Graham put it, a glimmer of hope is important for a policymaker. A policymaker doesn't say, are the odds 50-50 or are they against me, and give up. The policymaker says, if there's any odds at all, I'm going to work like the devil on that. And Ban Ki-moon deserves credit for that. But in the role I'm here tonight, I'm here as an analyst, not a policymaker. So I can applaud what he's doing to try to blow on that small spark, but say that if I, in the job of an analyst, had to make a bet, I would not bet my preferences, which is that he succeeds, but bet what I think would happen as best I can see the situation. And I think I'd be somewhat pessimistic on it. The key question is, whose side is time on? I was head of the National Intelligence Council when we did the first estimate on North Korean nuclear weapons back in '93, 12 years ago. And at that time, we felt that they had made perhaps up to 2 bombs based on material about which they had cheated back to the first Bush administration. They cheated on their IEA agreements. But we felt with only 2 bombs, they can't sell them or give them away. Probably wouldn't even explode one because there are such a few. But now that they've reprocessed the material for 6 more bombs and have a program which is ongoing, which we think is an enrichment program, which could make more, those constraints become less tight. The other thing that's extraordinary is how badly we've misjudged the North Koreans over that last 12 years. In '94, when we had the framework agreement where we would trade them a light water reactor for their putting inspectors in Yongbyon and not reprocessing, there was a general view that, it's 10 to 15 years to build a light water reactor, and by that time, surely the regime will have changed. Well, guess what? It didn't. And indeed, in the early days of the Bush II administration, when the illusionists were in control, there was also a feeling that this regime, an evil regime, could not persist, but it has. And I think the interesting question is, what's going on now? Have the North Koreans really set their foot down a path toward that better future, or are they buying time to keep their nuclear program going? From the North Korean point of view, the best outcome is to develop nuclear weapons and get access to outside resources. And if you can have both of those, have your cake and eat it too, that's a lot better than giving away your nuclear weapons. And so if I ask what's going on and I look at the ambiguities, I would say the North Koreans are really quite brilliant in their ability to play us. If you were a man from Mars and you came down to Earth and you said, look at this tiny little country, poor, weak, starving, how does it deal with a superpower? Well, you know what? It beats the superpower. On most of the agreements that we've reached with them, they've done better. And right now, the interesting thing is they've reached another agreement, which we hope is a step in the right direction, but there's enormous ambiguity about time. When does something happen? The North Koreans have just gone back today on what they originally said. Do I stop my nuclear program before I get the reactor, or vice versa? Well, maybe that's bluffing. But there's also an ambiguity about the enrichment. The agreement says they will dismantle all nuclear facilities, but they don't even admit to having enrichment facilities, which the Pakistanis have told us they gave them. So when we say what's in this agreement, there's a promise of hope, but there's an awful lot of ambiguity, and it's quite consistent with a hypothesis that the North Koreans are buying time because their best option is to have their cake and eat it too. If that's true, then I'm a little bit on the pessimistic side, just speaking analytically. But as a policymaker, I would be exactly where Ban Ki-moon is. I would keep trying, because it's possible that you can enlarge that glimmer of hope. It's possible that something will get better. And I think what Graham said about the change in the role of Chinese is probably the greatest source of optimism. If any country has leverage, it's China. And for the last several years, China has been profoundly ambivalent. They don't want to press the North Koreans because they don't want to destabilize North Korea, but they don't want the Korean Peninsula to go nuclear either. So China has been on the fence. And if by pressing the Americans and the North Koreans to reach this agreement, the Chinese committed enough of their prestige that they now have to have this agreement work, that might be what we call the ray of optimism, which might make this thing grow. In any case, I hope my analysis role is wrong, because I'm firmly behind what Ban Ki-moon is trying to do as a policymaker.
Thank you, Joe. Let me now ask you all to join the conversation, to come forward to a microphone, put a question to Minister Ban, who might also choose to respond to anything else he's heard this evening. Let me, though, address your question to the minister, not to me or Graham or Joe, because you'll have plenty of time to talk to us, and he's the man at the center of this event. Also, let me ask you all to, these are questions, not speeches. A question ends with an upward inflection and implies that you expect the person on stage to say something after you've said something. And also, I'd ask you to respect the fact that there are many of you in here who'd like to ask questions. We want to get as many as we can before Minister Ban needs to leave. So one question from each, please. We'll start with you, sir.
Hi, my name is Dylan Voorhees. I'm a graduate student at the Kennedy School. And I can imagine what our cool analysts would answer to this, so no need to address them. Is there any usefulness in thinking about the ultimate goal of the reunification of the Korean Peninsula in these talks or the foreseeable future, or is that really just too far down the road?
Well, unification is our goal. This ardent aspiration of over 70 million Korean people. But the problem is that before we are able to reach to that ultimate goal, aspiration of unification, we have to resolve all these serious security issues, including North Korean nuclear issue. Now, as I have explained, when this North Korean nuclear issue is over or in the process of resolving, we are going to initiate a very important meeting to discuss about transferring this current armistice arrangement into a peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. That will be a step forward toward the unification. To realize unification, I think my government takes a position that this unification should be realized in a gradual or step by step, instead of a sudden situation happening on the Korean Peninsula. South Korean government may be in a very much difficult position to observe or accommodate a sudden political, social, economic impact when North Korea suddenly collapses. To prevent this kind of situation happening, we are now trying to widen the scope of exchanges and cooperation, thereby bridging the gap of distrust. And also we need to reconcile each other. We need to promote the reconciliation process through exchanges of separated families, and also making North Korea reform and change and open up into international society. It may take a long time. We are not quite sure how long it will take time, but I can tell you surely that this is our ultimate goal, to realize unification. Thank you.
This gentleman in the balcony.
Yes. My name is An Byung-hyun. My English name is Daniel An. I'm in the economics PhD program here at Harvard. First, I would like to say thank you, Minister Bang Ki-moon, for coming here to speak at Harvard and to share your wisdom with all of us. And thank you, Professors Carter, Nai, and Allison, for enriching the discussion with your scholarship. My question is the following. So as Professor Carter emphasized, even one nuclear weapon can wreak far worse devastation than Hurricane Katrina. Now, if the current working assumption is that North Korea possesses 6 to 8 fission weapons, then shouldn't the agreement, the focus of the talks, be not only on ending current work on the nuclear weapons program, but also a pledge at least to not use the nuclear weapons, the existing nuclear weapons North Korea has, and perhaps even their abandonment or confiscation by United Nations or something like that?
Now, first of all, we are not quite sure. We don't have any exact intelligence information how many North Koreans have manufactured nuclear weapons. The key question, our end goal and objective and principle is that North Korea should dismantle all nuclear weapons, whatever and how many they have claimed to have manufactured. It's significant that North Korea has committed to abandoning all nuclear weapons and existing programs. Existing programs includes all plutonium-based or uranium-based. There has been a lot of talks about what about the uranium enrichment program. Now this, we have demanded and urged North Korea to dismantle all nuclear programs, whether it be based on plutonium or uranium. So we need to continuously urge and see North Korea faithfully implement this joint agreement.
Just
Thank you very
for your
much.
I have the joint statement in front of me. The text reads, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, i.e. North Korea, committed to abandoning all nuclear weapons and existing nuclear programs. So the weapons are, on paper, included. Sir.
My name is Motokazu Matsutani. As an international student from Japan, let me ask this question. What is your advice to the Japanese government to resolve the abduction issue? And how should the Japanese government take the best advantage of the agreement, recent agreement?
May I explain what the abduction issue is for the wider audience? Some years back, North Korea abducted Japanese citizens from Japanese territory. They'd go along in a submarine, come ashore, take a Japanese citizen, take them back to North Korea and make interpreters out of them. Rather astonishing practice, which North Korea has admitted to doing, but has not given a full accounting to Japan of all of the abductees and their fate. This is a big issue in Japan, as big in some ways to Japanese feeling as is the nuclear issue, which is also very big in Japan. I'm sorry, I just wanted to give the audience the background on that. Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to say that Japan has been playing very constructive role, and Korea, Japan, United States have been maintaining very close coordinations in this process of negotiation over North Korean nuclear issue. We know how difficult and how important this abduction case issue is to Japanese people. My government has always expressed its full support to and sympathies to Japanese people and government over this issue. Now, this abduction case issue has not been much discussed in the course of six-party talks, because this six-party talks was meant and focused on resolving North Korean nuclear issue. Japanese government sometimes wanted to raise this issue and discussed among the six parties, but since this agreement was adopted, I think that there is an opportunity and good ground for Japanese government to engage with North Korea in negotiations or dialogue to first normalize a relationship with North Korea, where you will be able to discuss these abduction issues with North Korea.
Sir.
Yes, my name is An Kwan-sun. I'm a student at the Harvard Business School. And I think it's important for us to understand how North Korea will evolve over time to resolve these issues. And my question is, how do you think the succession issue will play out, since Kim Jong-il is more than 60 years old already? Will he really go to his second son? And whether you think there are any forces or factions within North Korea that are pushing for internal changes in that country?
Well, this is rather a very sensitive issue for a foreign minister of Korea to mention anything about succession issue of North Korea.
Oh, come on. You're here. It's Harvard.
No one will tell.
I think I understand this Korean TVs and C-SPANs covering this whole discussions, which will be broadcast to nationwide. If I may say one thing, the assessment, our observation is that Chairman Kim Jong-il seems to be well in power, managing every aspect of North Korean society. Now, we do not have much information what's going on in their internal politics. That should be something to be left to people of North Korea to decide what kind of systems or leadership they want to have. For us, we will try to convince and help North Korea to reform and open up their society, so that we'll be able to have much greater exchanges in not only in economic but also social and culturally, to bridge the gap which has been created during the 5 decades long division. I think I will stop here. I hope you will understand that.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Grace Cayley. I'm a second-year student at the law school at Harvard. I just wanted to ask you a question about the 1994 agreed framework. I think in assessing how to move forward past the six-party talks, it might be constructive to take a look at why that agreement failed. I think among the many factors, there are a lot over which we have no control. So, the recalcitrance of the US Congress or North Korean behavior, famines and floods. One of the things that we do have control over is the structure of the agreement. And coming from a sort of legal perspective, I'm just sort of interested in how you think we can phrase or structure this agreement to better enable us to verify that the agreement is moving forward, verify that North Korea is in compliance. And in particular, I think it was Article 5, perhaps, that talks about this commitment for commitment, step by step sort of process, which didn't seem to work so well last time. What are the plans that your government has for fixing that structure this time around?
First of all, you should understand that both agreements, Geneva Agreed Framework or this time Beijing Joint Statement, are all political declarations, political agreements. It's not legal type, treaty type agreements. However, this is also very important political commitment made among 6 parties. There is a very significant difference between 1994 Geneva Agreement and also this joint statement adopted in Beijing. First of all, in terms of participants to this agreement, there were only 2 parties, United States and North Korea, who made this agreed framework in 1994. This agreed framework was broken because of the violation by North Korea. That is why second nuclear crisis had happened, and we have been engaged to negotiate to prevent the further proliferation as well as the further development of nuclear weapons program by North Korea. Now, this 6-party talks agreement is a very important political statement agreed among 6 countries, and we need to engage in to discuss the detailed action programs which will facilitate the implementation of these principles and goals. But if you read carefully this joint statement, it contains all important elements and principles and goals. But one may claim that there is certain ambiguity, but to complement this ambiguity, we are now going to work to discuss the detailed action programs. And another important difference between the two is that while Geneva Agreement was mainly meant for freeze versus corresponding measures, but this Beijing Joint Statement is meant for the immediate dismantlement versus corresponding measures. When I say corresponding measures, means providing economic assistance, including energy, multilateral security assurance, and also some, at a later stage, giving right to North Korea for the peaceful use of nuclear energy, including light water reactors.
Ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Jongju Lee, a second-year Kennedy School student. Thank you for coming and your comments and a great speech. My question is for you, the foreign minister. You said the 6-party talk could develop more permanent multilateral security regime in Northeast Asia. If that's the case, I think the South Korea should wisely use this new regime to speed up unification process between the 2 Korea by actively coordinating all other parties' different national interests. So to do that, what should be the South Korean strategy?
Basically, I think unification process should be discussed and resolved between the 2 parties directly concerned, that is South and North Korea. When I said that it would be desirable to establish a sort of multilateral security mechanism in Northeast Asia, that is meant to discuss about all regional security issues. There are many important issues and challenges in the 21st century. Not only these nuclear issues, but there are many security challenges, proliferation of weapons of mass destructions, and missile issues, and many other issues. And these kind of issues should be discussed among the parties concerned in Northeast Asia. Okay? Thank you.
Hello. Hello, my name is Angela Ji Hyung-kang. I'm from Korea. I'm a mid-career MPA student at Kennedy School. Thank you for coming all the way from Korea. And thank you for panel for your comments. I would like to ask you that, regarding any skeptical pessimism, I try to be optimistic for our for world peace of Korean Peninsula. I'm also helping the civil society organization who is trying to set up university to cultivate human capital for youth leadership in Pyongyang, North Korea. And then Prime Minister Ban, how do you see civil society's power to contribute world peace, peace for Korean Peninsula, and then how much, and then also to panel, how much do you believe young people's power for social change and then social transformation? Thank you.
The civil society's contribution will be very important. While most of the reconciliatory and exchanges and program cooperations are being done at governmental level, at this time there are many NGOs and humanitarian civil societies who are now involved in the process of exchanges and cooperation. We do encourage to continuously engage in that very important and noble process. But there may be some limitations on the part of North Korea. Recently, they have requested some international humanitarian assistance to withdraw from North Korea. However, it would be important to continuously try to engage North Korea to bring them outside by widening the doors for such opportunities. So I would encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Last question goes to the gentleman in the balcony.
Yes, you mentioned that we really know little about North Korea.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Mike Gomez. I'm a freshman at Harvard. You mentioned that we know very little about North Korea's internal government and how secure Jong Kim is. We also don't even know the exact number of nuclear weapons that North Korea possesses. And I would just ask you if you agree that in order to implement this agreement better and to make sure that the North Koreans are living up to the expectations that they've set for themselves, if we have to improve our intelligence capabilities, both the U.S. and the South Koreans, in terms of dealing with Korea?
This is, there is important passage in a joint statement. North Korea has committed to abide by all full scope safeguard of IAEA. IAEA is an important organization of the United Nations specialized in inspection and verifications. And they will soon begin in technical consultation with North Koreans in accordance with the joint statement. But all this detailed program action will have to be worked out among 6 parties when we meet again in November in Beijing. So we will watch and see how faithfully North Koreans will implement this agreement. Thank you.
I think that we need to bring the evening to a close now. For those of you who are new students to the Kennedy School, this forum illustrates what this school and this opportunity is all about. You had students here from throughout the university, not just the Kennedy School, meeting together, talking about a subject that is not only current, but of the deepest importance to human society. You had the illustration of everything that we try to create here at the Kennedy School in our graduate, Ban Ki-moon. And we have, in the spirit that he's trying to apply to this very difficult problem, the spirit that Joe Nye alluded to. In matters of importance, no matter how difficult it gets, no matter how pessimistic, how cynical we can all be, you can't give up. It's the only world we have. This is the only government we have. This is the only government that South Korea has, and we're very, very fortunate to have the kind of people represented by Ban Ki-moon at the helm in these important countries. And so keep coming back to the forum. Let's hope that each and every one of you ends up like Ban Ki-moon, the kind of international civil servant we're all so proud of. Mr. Minister, thank you so much for taking the time to come back here and to share your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's terrific. Fabulous.
I hope I have gone.